SpaceX's Starship program continued to gather momentum in early March, as the company shrugged off recent setbacks to iron out kinks ahead of the spacecraft's third test launch. The company's ever-optimistic leader, Elon Musk, continues to live up to his fail-fast and fail-forward philosophy as SpaceX attempted yet another S-28 stacking. This unrelenting pace is even more astounding given the other projects in the pipeline at Starbase and the ever-present scrutiny of the government. In today's video, we give you a rundown of the latest activities at Boca Chica and the overall picture of the Starship program. Let's get started. To say 2024 has been a busy year would be a strong understatement. Following the calamitous conclusion of Starship Test Flight 2 in November last year, Musk and SpaceX have been under pressure to identify and rectify the root issues. After the demise of Ship 25, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, grounded SpaceX Starship launches pending its investigation and analysis of the company's internal reports. Despite the government restriction, SpaceX remained confident that it would be cleared by the FAA and stick to a first-quarter launch. In a series of statements, interviews, and tweets, Musk has continued to declare that Ship 28 and Super Heavy Booster 10 would take off within the first 2 weeks of March. At present, the launch is now penciled in for March 14th. The first of SpaceX's predictions has partially come true, with the FAA announcing on the 26th of February that its investigation of the November 18th launch had concluded. Satisfied by SpaceX's internal report and 17 proposed corrective measures, the governmental authority took the first step towards giving Test Flight 3 the green light. Shortly after the FAA's announcement, SpaceX tweeted an optimistic update that spoke of how Flight Test 2 brought lessons that informed vehicle upgrades debuting on Flight 3. Earlier in February, SpaceX soldiered on and prepared to stack Ship 28 on top of Booster 10 for the first time ahead of a wet dress rehearsal. However, problems with the initial stacking and propellant loading delayed the WDR by a few days. Then, when these problems were seemingly dealt with, another propellant issue led to another abort, and the WDR was cancelled. Since then, Flight Test 3's 2 phases were fired up and tested separately for about a week in a bid to zero in on the problems. Following the second aborted WDR on the 16th of February, people were beginning to worry that Test Flight 3 would be delayed further, perhaps indefinitely. However, fears were allayed when Ship 28 was loaded up onto suborbital Pad B a few days later. Workers were seen removing 3 engines and potentially reinstalling them or swapping in new ones. These engines then underwent spin prime testing, a process that brings up the engine's turbopumps to speed without igniting them. The ship also got a new livery, complete with the SpaceX logo in the correct orientation, a move greatly appreciated by fans. Several tests were also done at the orbital tank farm and launch mount to iron out kinks that may have contributed to the aborted WDRs. Trucks were also seen hauling in new tanks to replace 2 older vertical tanks that were removed from the farm. The exact purpose of these tanks remains a mystery, but keen observers believe these are part of a new pressurization system for the tank farm. Activities on the mount included purge tests of the booster quick disconnect, QD, and Raptor engine QD. After all the testing and upgrades, the 29th of February saw Ship 28 rolled back to the orbital launch pad in preparation for its third stacking onto the awaiting Booster 10. Interestingly, SpaceX flexed its multitasking muscles by unloading Ship 28 from suborbital Pad B while Booster 10 was being raised onto the orbital launch mount. As luck would have it though, Mechazilla, the orbital launch tower, decided to throw a spanner in the works. One of the chopstick arms suffered a malfunction, meaning the ship could not be picked up for the stacking. SpaceX engineers would then spend the rest of the day addressing the issue and conducting tests. By the next day, the chopstick issue had been resolved and S-28 was stacked on top of Booster 10 by mid-morning. Unlike the first ever attempt, this stacking went by without a hitch and was completed within 2 hours. This smooth stacking may have been a result of the greater alignment prowess facilitated by a modified connecting pin installed on the previously faulty chopstick. Many of SpaceX's 2-stage launches have had more than their fair share of alignment problems, but hopefully those may soon be a thing of the past. At the same time, the ship's quick disconnect, QD system, which had been fairly busy during the February WDR, was also being worked on by engineers and technicians. We can only speculate on the specifics, but it's possible most of the work was on the QD arm and its supporting connection system. A QD system is primarily responsible for safely disengaging the spacecraft from the propellant tanks that load it with fuel. Shortly after 4 p.m. CST, the work on the QD was finished. The ship's QD door was promptly opened and the QD arm was engaged with no hassles. After the engagement, several procedures were carried out. These included retraction tests, quick disconnects, and re-engagement tests. Workers stood nearby every step of the way, observing keenly and documenting the progress. QD functions proved cumbersome in February's dress rehearsal, and they were a key factor behind the lengthy delays between WDR attempts. It makes sense to fully test these functions during stacking for both time and safety reasons. Testing with live propellant around is significantly riskier and could have had a negative knock-on effect on the fueling process. QD systems must maintain integrity between launches, given the fact that reusability of facilities is a key aim for SpaceX. Additionally, the continued ramp-up of launch cadence means QD systems must be ready to go again quickly after a launch. Speaking of increased launch cadence, Ship 29 also made its way from Starbase's build site to the launch site next to the orbital launch mount. This iconic image of Ship 29 standing next to the fully stacked Ship 28 had space lovers going crazy at the underlying message. Starship Flight Test 4 is coming much sooner than anticipated. Super Heavy Booster 11, Ship 29's first stage, remains tucked away in Mega Bay 1. No doubt, we'll soon get a glimpse of it being wheeled about near the launch site after Flight Test 3. Another exciting sight was the foundations of what may turn out to be another orbital launch pad. A few hours after the Flight Test 3 and Flight Test 4 photo op, Ship 29 was wheeled onto suborbital Pad B for its own series of tests and checks. While Ship 28 was being fully stacked, Cameron County announced road and beach closures for Boca Chica ahead of the wet dress rehearsal. March 3rd was the primary date, with the 4th and 5th serving as the backup days. Live footage of Starbase showed incessant activity leading up to and following the stacking. Workers and vehicles were going to and fro, sirens were blaring, and PA announcements were ringing off. Oftentimes, deep into the night, the company is seemingly operating as a well-lubricated machine and going the extra mile to satisfy its promises. Side-by-side rockets, new launch pads, and the steady erection of new launch towers are very much in keeping with the company's goal of launching 9 Starship test flights in 2024 alone. The team seems dedicated to the fail fast and fail forward philosophy, an approach that boss Elon Musk regards as a key pillar of innovation. Long-term, SpaceX plans to develop the Starship into a reusable interplanetary vessel that can ferry and support 100 people to Mars and back. The plausibility of such a feat is still a blazing topic of debate, and the apparent deadline of 2050 has invited accusations of mental instability. Of course, time will tell. In the near term, Musk and co. aim to hone a Starship through suborbital intercontinental flight. The first phase of this plan is to get the spacecraft to speeds of about 17,000 miles per hour before re-entry. The Pacific waters off Hawaii have been identified as a potential splashdown zone for initial test flights. Once this is done to a satisfactory level, soft ground landings will be the next step. If all goes well, SpaceX will be carrying out intercontinental flights at unprecedented times, revolutionizing air travel as we know it. Los Angeles to Toronto, a flight that takes the best part of 5 hours with current commercial aircraft, would be trimmed down to just 22 minutes. After the close of the FAA's investigation, its report included 17 fixes that SpaceX had proposed ahead of a further launch. Of these 17 changes, 7 were for the Super Heavy booster and 10 were for the Starship upper stage. Whether those fixes had been implemented before the mid-February WDRs is unclear, but they certainly should have been by the time of the third stacking. The report also included the likeliest root causes for the failed launch of Test Flight 2. For Booster 9, a filter blockage in the liquid oxygen distribution system led to an explosion of one of the 33 engines and, ultimately, the booster itself. This blockage led to a loss of inlet pressure in the engine's oxidizer turbopumps. Proposed fixes for boosters included vehicle hardware redesigns to increase tank filtration, updated engine control algorithms, updated thrust vector control system modeling, re-evaluation of engine analyses based on OFT2 data. The problems with the ship stemmed from a planned liquid oxygen dump 7 minutes into the flight. During the dump, the aft end of the ship exploded and caught fire. The fire severely damaged the ship's electronics, which in turn led to the activation of the automated flight termination system. According to Musk, the dump was done because the spacecraft would not have leftover liquid oxygen were it carrying a payload, like it would be during a real mission. Theoretically, the Starship is supposed to use up most, if not all, of its liquid oxygen when bearing the weight of a payload. Musk argued that the spacecraft would have reached orbit had it been carrying a payload. Some of the fixes SpaceX suggested for the upper stage are performance of transient load analysis, flammability analysis updates, installation of additional fire protection, hardware redesigns to increase robustness and reduce complexity, hardware changes to reduce leaks, creation of analytical guidance, modeling updates, operational changes eliminating pre-second engine cutoff propellant dumps. SpaceX now has to prove the satisfactory implementation of these standards in order for its launch license to be approved. Following the successful stacking of Ship 28 onto Booster 10, the company announced plans to carry out Test Flight 3 on the 14th of March. However, it remains to be seen whether the license will be issued by. On that note, we've come to the end of the video. Thanks again for watching until the end. We hope you liked the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell to stay up to date and never miss an upload. See you next time.